Good morning and welcome to the Shakopee Chamber Podcast. My name is Angie Whitcomb and I am the president and CEO of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau and your host for this fun little show. We started this podcast, as you know, back in June as a way of staying connected with our members and bringing them all sorts of information. Now, over the last several months, it's been mainly COVID or political as we've just weathered the election season. But today I'm super excited because we are bringing you just a local gentleman who's doing some really cool things. But before we get to that, I need to thank our sponsors. This podcast doesn't happen without the generous support of our members. And this quarter, our sponsor is O'Brien's Public House. And most of you know them as that great, fun little Irish pub right at the front gate to our historic downtown. They've got great food, great atmosphere, friendly bartenders. I mean, what more could you want, right? That's what Irish pubs are supposed to be. But right now, O'Brien's, along with all of our bars and restaurants, are struggling as they do their part to help control the spread of this pandemic and help keep our hospitals from being overwhelmed so that we can all stay safe and healthy. And they've been asked to shift to takeout, and that means their servers are they're in a spot that none of us would wish on them. So I am going to encourage all of you listeners to support our sponsor at O'Brien's Public House, as well as all of the other bars and restaurants. You get a month off of cooking. Just call up, order it, go pick it up. Get your kids to do the dishes. It doesn't get any easier than that. So please keep them all on your heart this holiday season and make sure you support them. And this month, even with the shutdown, O'Brien's is running a fantastic special. We are all in the midst of our holiday shopping, and gift giving is getting harder and harder. I'm running out of creative ideas, but O'Brien's is making it easy. If you buy $100 worth of gift cards, you get a $25 gift card just for you to use after the holidays, during the holidays. We are going to open up again, and you will be able to slide up to their bar and order a big ginger and just get on with your day. So make sure you support them. And a huge thanks to our sponsors at O'Brien's Public House. Now, on to the fun part. So our guest today is Eric Harkins, and Eric, welcome. So you are doing so many cool things. I think in your bio, it says you're, I'm going to read it. You're a HR leader, you're a corporate wonk, you are a public speaker, you're a leadership coach, and now you're an author. And that's what we're going to talk about today. You have written this amazing book, but so welcome, Eric. I'll let you get a word in.
Yeah, no, thank you. Glad to be here. Excited to talk about the book and what we're doing at GKG.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And I see that you put the backdrop back up today. I love it. Nice job. Yes. Hey, that's what this is all about. I work for a chamber. It's all about plugging the people in our cool community. So yesterday was the first time you and I spoke, and I am still just kind of scratching my head. You have been in Shakopee for 17 years. I have been in Shakopee for 11 years. You're doing amazing things. We're doing amazing things. And until I saw a friend comment on your book on LinkedIn, I didn't know you existed. How is that even possible?
I have no idea how that's possible. And, I'm kind of a serial networker, and I've been doing it long before it was a necessary thing to do as part of kind of career transition. And I do not know how our paths have crossed, but I'm glad they did, because yesterday's conversation was so much fun. I think today's is going to be a lot of fun too. So.
Oh, we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to have a lot of fun because of this book. But so we're going to talk about your book. We're going to talk about GKG, and then we're going to talk about kind of the one-on-one work you do with companies, because I think that's really important, and with leaders as well. So, okay, the title of your book, it's so simple. Great leaders make sure Monday morning doesn't suck. It's so that title caught, well, first of all, a mutual good friend of ours commented, and when she speaks, I listen. She's like my own personal EF Hutton. And she's like, you got to read this book. So I went on to Amazon and ordered it because I loved your title. Eric, we're going to unpack this thing. Yeah. But first of all, I want to kind of talk about your motivation for this book. And I know a lot of it comes from 25 years in corporate America. Right. But there's a real personal connection here. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. In the dedication, I dedicate the book to my niece, Shannon O'Hara, who passed away of a terminal brain cancer at the age of 13. And she died within 9 months of being diagnosed, a very rare, inoperable form. And I share in the dedication that, I learned a lot from her. Mm-hmm. And the biggest lesson I learned was to do what makes you happy. And she had the most positive, upbeat personality of anyone I've ever met. And at 13, she was facing death. And my sister and brother-in-law have kept her spirit alive through the Shannon Foundation.org. And they've done some great work with brain cancer research and youth scholarships in Rochester, which is where she lived. And, it's a pretty terrible thing to go through, and helps put a lot of things in perspective. So, I certainly wanted to dedicate my positive and upbeat outlook on a lot of the lessons I learned from her. So.
Well, you've done her proud. I mean, you really have. And as a recovering recruiter, I have to tell you, so much in this book resonated with me. And, we're just going to dive right into it. So first of all, I told you yesterday, if we skip ahead right away to chapter 6, it could be, I told you, this could have been a white paper like this. You didn't have to write the whole book. You boiled it down. Can a bad leader create a good culture? No, that is the whole chapter. So talk to me about this book. We're going to unpack some things like chapter 6, but so what drove you to write this?
Yeah, so it's really kind of a cool story. I'm going to go back in time about 8 years, and I finished a meeting with my team, and I had a kid, and I call him a kid because he was about 22, maybe 23, just out of college. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, hey, Eric, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I had not. And I said, no. And he said, well, why not? And I said, well, why do you think I should write a book? He said, you have all these funny stories, but I always learn a lesson. I don't know. I think it'd be a good book. And I said, okay. I didn't do anything with it. And a couple months later, he popped his head in my office and he said, hey, how's the book coming? I said, hey, there's no book. And he said, there's a book and you're going to write it. So he was kind of the first one that planted a seed. But really, I had this crazy journey through corporate America. As you said, I spent 25 years kind of grinding away, and I didn't do it by design, but I ended up working in all these different environments, from, family owned to Fortune 50 to tech to healthcare. And I kind of looked back and said, wow, I learned a ton of lessons along the way. But the one thing that always stayed true was, good leaders were good leaders and bad leaders were bad leaders. And it doesn't matter what environment you're in or what product you're selling. Your only differentiator right now is the type of leader that you allow to have in your company. And so that's sort of the spirit of the journey. And I had a lot of fun writing it, and really glad you enjoyed it, and hope other people enjoy it as well.
I've read it twice.
That's awesome.
And I, as I promised you, I was going to go review it on Amazon, but I find myself getting a little too fangirly about this book. So I'm like, oh, that nobody's going to believe that. So I keep erasing it. So it will get done today. I just need to make it sound, not like, oh, I got to go buy this book, buy 12 of them, give them as gifts. But I do think that that's important. So, you do learn lessons, and you talk about, we've all had good leaders and we've all had bad leaders, and you learn lessons from both of them. Yeah. I love the story you tell about the manager who told you that the way to be successful is to kind of make your employees fear you and to be a jerk. That's right. How you're a good leader. It's like, that just seems completely opposite of everything I want to work for.
Right. And I guess I didn't realize it at the time, but it was one of the best gifts I had in my career, because he was literally my first leader. Wow. Right out of college, in training, and that was his style. And he was very serious about it. And his sort of parting words of wisdom were exactly what you said. And, it just sort of started this, conscious or subconscious effort to say, I think there's a different way that you can do it and still work your way through corporate America.
Yeah. You finished the book with, I spent 25 years trying to prove him wrong. And it sounds like you've done it, right? And the fact that you have an employee telling you to write the book, I think that's great. So let's talk about, because this kind of weaves through the whole book, lead. One of the things that struck me about that, and I'm looking down, not to be rude, but I'm flipping through my book with my sticky notes.
Awesome.
So what I love about this is, it's not like an acronym that, L for, leaders. It's leadership, expectations, and development. And what struck me about that is, I think too many times people get into a leadership role and they feel like, oh, I've made it. And the people they report to feel like, oh, they've made it. They're leaders. They don't need any help. But are you kidding me? That's where it starts, right? So let's talk about some of these, because I do think expectations and development of a leader are what can make or break. You don't need to develop the staff if they don't want to work for the person who they have to report to. What a waste of time and money, right? Absolutely. So let's talk about your kind of 8 bullet points here.
Yeah. So, this is something I kind of developed over the years, and I call it kind of a common sense. Hey, here's the things that I saw over 25 years that good leaders do.
Yeah.
And I've used it for years and sort of refined it. And there's no science behind it. It wasn't developed by a PhD, and some of those tools are awesome. And I like a lot of those tools that are out there, and they're all effective.
Yeah.
But this is just, hey, if your leaders do this and you package it together,
yeah.
And the first one is, do your leaders, and it's questions that you need to ask about your leaders.
Yeah.
Do your leader, create a culture high performing people want to be a part of, right? Do they bring energy and enthusiasm to work every day? Do they support the direction of the company with no hidden agenda? And they're, nobody's looked at it and said, wow, Eric, how'd you come up with this? This is really revolutionary stuff.
Because it's common sense.
It's just common sense.
Yeah.
And, in my last experience in corporate America, which I hopefully have retired from forever, we really brought it to life. And we used it as the interview guide, and we used it as the annual review. Nice. And when we took it that serious and said, hey, on the front end, and I love to use this line, it's going to be how we hire and why we fire. And then it's the annual review. So, hey, your compensation, your future is going to be based on whether or not you do these things. It became very real. It became a game changer for us. We were consolidating 4 companies into one new brand. We needed something that we could hold everybody kind of accountable to.
Yeah.
And the other thing that makes the tool really easy is it makes conversations about performance, both top performers and underperformers. There's no emotion to it. Hey, this isn't emotional. We talked about building relationships at all levels of the organization. You've had on your list to travel with, Billy for 4 months, and you still haven't done it. So help me understand how you think that's building relationships at all levels of the organization. There's no emotion there. It's just, this is what we need you to do. And it's a really powerful tool that can be the game changer and a foundation for how companies look at their leaders.
Yeah, I love it. And you're right. It's so simple. And most people know me know I'm a recovering recruiter. And I think the number one thing I see in hiring and firing and training and onboard, we just overcomplicate it. Right. If you are clear with the expectations, you have a simple plan like this, it takes all of that out of there. It's when you overcomplicate it that the emotions and the personal come in, because you're not really sure what you built or even how to measure it. So then it gets crazy. So I love it. And then, okay. So there's this phenomenon, I think, as the world gets crazier and our jobs get more difficult and technology advances, it's called imposter syndrome, right? So you get a leader, and I love this story that you told. I'm sorry you didn't get the job, but you get a leader who has to be a subject matter expert. And the two are very different.
Very different.
Very different. And that was my aha moment, the first read through here. And then the second time I was like, yes, like preach, Eric. Yeah. But it's true. If you look at my team right now, Tim Zunker, who works for us, subject matter expert on destination marketing.
Awesome.
Not me, but I know how to hire somebody who's going to do that. And I know where we want to go and how to encourage him and groom him to get us there. Right. See, when I was recruiting accounting and finance professionals for 25 years, that's your history, for 15 years, I'm not an accountant, nor have I ever played one on TV, nor would my bank accuse me of balancing my checkbook. But I knew what made a good accountant and how to place them in companies where they would be a good fit. I don't need to know everything, but I think we get so wrapped up oh, I'm in charge of this now. I have to know everything. I have to have every answer. You don't talk about that.
Yeah, well, and that's what made you a good leader. And one of the mistakes a company makes is that they promote the subject matter expert because they're the subject matter expert. And there's a big difference between being a good leader and being a subject matter expert.
Yeah.
And, the story I tell in the book is an interview that, it was down to me and one other person. And I got all the way through the interview process until my very last interview. And I was asked a question if I could do something that was very tactical within HR. And I, just said, absolutely not. And they were kind of surprised. And I said, listen, I don't know how to do that, but I can promise you I know how to hire people who know how to do that.
Yeah.
And as I say in the book, apparently that was not the answer they were looking for because the other guy got it. And that's okay. But what I've seen throughout my career is, when you have a subject matter expert in a very senior level leadership role, they do what subject matter experts do. They want to be subject matter experts.
Yeah.
And they're in the weeds and they're making the decisions. And those high potential people in that team or that organization get really frustrated because, wait, I thought that's why you hired me. Like, let me do this. You know? And, I joke about it all the time. I was very fortunate and I feel very lucky that I was able to be the head of HR at 3 different companies throughout my career.
Yep.
And I don't know that much about HR. People always laugh when I say that. But trust me, talk to anyone in my network, they'll be like, this guy doesn't know anything about HR. Every now and then I'll have a family member or somebody call me and, hey, I have a question, blah, blah. And, I don't know.
Let me connect you with somebody smarter than me.
I'm like, let me talk to somebody on my team. I'll get right back to you. And, I think it's just a different way for companies to step back and say, okay, do I have leaders who are getting energy by developing the people on their team and getting really excited when somebody is ready for the next level or next opportunity? Or do I have leaders on my team who are making all the decisions? And those are 2 very different
Absolutely. Things. And the people who should be the subject matter experts feel unvalued. I mean, why do they need me? I'm going to work my butt off and, Dave's going to tell me he's got a better answer. We're going to do it his way. And then you know what? I'm going home early after screwing around at work all day. I'm going to polish my resume and I'm going to go work somewhere else.
Listen, I have a concept I've talked about for years and it's in the book, address the 1 or lose the 9. That is this belief that, every team of 10 people has one person who isn't doing what you need them to. Now, that doesn't mean they need to be fired necessarily, but it does mean they need a different level of coaching or, accountability than they've been getting. Yep. And if you don't address that one person, you are going to lose the other 9.
For sure.
3 of them will go across the street to your competitor. 3 of them will model that behavior, whatever that behavior is, because you let it be acceptable.
Yeah.
And the worst, and every company has this that I've ever worked in, 3 of them will quit, but they actually never give you their notice.
Yeah.
They show up every day, but they quit you a long time ago.
Yep.
And they're punching the clock, waiting for 5 o'clock so they can get on with the weekend. And it's a simple, again, concept. And you said this earlier, part of the book, I hope, is just, let's not overcomplicate this, right? We make it so much harder than it needs to be. This thing called leading people is not that hard. It just blows me away when people think it's so complicated and there's so many layers to it. There really aren't. So,
or that they have to make it that complicated so they don't, so nobody finds out that they don't really need them. They're not really doing anything except making sure that everyone's feeling energized and pumped and having fun and being productive.
Right.
So there are 3 lessons in this book that for those who can't see it at home, we're both laughing hysterically right now, but so I'm going to say it and we've had a conversation. So actually, no, you tell us the 3 lessons that you have learned along the way, because they're just so good.
I will ask for forgiveness later. So
yes,
I talk in the book about, listen, there's 3 lessons I've learned throughout my career that I think are the 3 most important lessons. And lesson number 1 is it's okay to have fun at work. And lesson number 2 is poor performing employees don't quit voluntarily. And lesson number 3 is assholes are assholes. They don't change.
Yep.
And that one usually gets a little bit of a reaction. And I know who my audience is, but all of them are important. But that lesson number 3 is at the end of the day, it's about what type of leader do you allow to have in your company?
Yeah.
And this concept, and it's on the back cover of the book, a bad leader will never create a good culture.
No, and it's chapter 6.
And it's pretty much chapter 6. So yeah, exactly. And so, I don't have to use that word. And one of the, I tell a story in the book, which was kind of the coolest moment, it was the coolest moment in my career, where we had rolled out and talked about these lessons. And, every time I would interview someone, I would talk about the lessons. And, I'd use lead and I'd say, hey, if you're going to, work in this company, here's what we expect of you. Here's what we're going to do together. We're going to have fun. We're not going to let underperformers, and we're not going to let bad leaders lead people.
Yep.
And about 6 months later, I get a text from one of our very senior level executives, and he says, I need to talk to you about so-and-so. He's in serious violation of rule number 3. And I had no idea what he was talking about, because I didn't call them rules and it was lessons. So anyway, I walked down to his office and he just lights me up. I said, well, first of all, what's rule number 3? And he said, it's your rule. And he used the word and he said, you told me that I wouldn't have to work with leaders like that. And that we as a leadership team would make sure we didn't have bad leaders. This guy's not a bad leader. He's a really bad leader. And I want to know what you're going to do about it. And I sat back and said, this is probably the coolest moment in my career. And I walked back to my office and I ordered 150 coffee mugs that just had one thing written on them, rule number 3. And we did a desk drop. And on Monday morning, intentionally, everyone walked into work and got the mug, and there was no explanation, no reason why. And it just happened. What's rule number 3? Oh, you don't know what rule number 3 is? Hallway conversations. And it became our foundation. And we didn't have to use the word anymore. Everybody knew what it meant. But as an organization, we were self-policing, and that was amazing. And I've never seen anything like it. And just a moment to always be proud of. And again, just a cool thing. But it's a real thing, and it gets a laugh. And, when I say, hey, your only job as a leader is to make sure Monday morning doesn't suck. Yeah. And I talk about rule number 3. I get a reaction and it's fun, but I always back it up with, but if you take those 2 things seriously, if you really pause and say, what does it mean to not make Monday morning suck?
Yeah.
How hard is it? And it's very hard to not allow bad leaders to work in your organization and to have the stomach to make some of those decisions. If you do those 2 things, I promise your organization, your company will grow and thrive, and it will be a fun place to work. And I say that because I saw it, and we did it, and it was just one of the best experiences I've ever had. So
yeah, well, and it really is that simple. And the violators of rule number 3, they're like dandelions. You leave one and you don't deal with it, pretty soon your whole yard is weeds. And that's the same with your company. And that is hard to come back from. And it's hard as a leader. No, but again, we add that personal. We don't want to fire anyone. But I love how in the book you talk about in the interview process, like, have you had to fire somebody? How do you feel about that? That's a really important part of leadership, because you're right. 1 versus 9. I would rather replace 1 and build some credibility with the 9 who are tired of working with rule number 3 violator and grow my company. But that's not easy to do.
And I ask leaders all the time, just think about the last time, an underperformer, somebody who was not, hitting their numbers, was not a cultural fit, whatever reason, a poor performer, walked into your office or called you on the phone and gave you their notice.
Yeah.
And I let it sit there for a second. And I said, now think about the last time one of your high potential people did that. And it's, this sort of light bulb moment of, oh, wow. And that's lesson number 2, right? I mean, poor performing employees don't quit voluntarily. And you're right. I mean, and it's not a fun part of the job. Listen, I've had a career where I've had to make some very difficult decisions. I've had to do mass layoffs. I've had to close retail locations. I've had to fire people. I don't like it. Nobody likes it. But to your point, it is part of being a leader. And you have to understand that, signing up for leading people means hopefully spending a lot more of your time with really high performing, engaged leaders, helping them achieve their goals and dreams. But there are going to be times where you have to address the 1.
Yeah. Well, and I've made some mistakes in hiring in my career, and my whole team knew it. Maybe before I did, or before I let myself acknowledge it, because it's like, oh, now I got to redo this. But, it's that whole credibility thing. And you talk in chapter 16 about if it's broke, fix it.
Yeah.
And I loved the story of, you were working retail and you went all around, but people don't trust that their leaders are going to fix something, even if they say, oh, we have an open door policy, and they it's that, oh, that's really a great idea. Thanks so much. I'll take that under advisement. They're not going to do anything. Then that employee is going to quit too. So talk to me about how you got leaders to decide to fix something that was broken, and because that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Now you're walking the walk.
I couldn't agree more. And, to your point, it's not easy, and it is based on trust, and it takes time. So, I talk about in the book, I was in an interim role where I was traveling all the time. I mean, every week I was on multiple flights, and I loved every second of it. But I was in front of dozens of our employees every single week. And I asked every single employee, hey, what's the worst part about working here? And I never got a good answer. Oh, there's nothing's wrong with working here. I said, well, there has to be something that sucks about working here. Like, come on, what is it? When you come into work and you have that moment, like, God, I hate working here. What just happened? and nobody would tell me. And I finally was talking to one of our regional vice presidents, and I just said, hey, is there a way to let people know that like I really want to know the answer? Like I genuinely want to know. And slowly over time, it was like, well, we told him, and wow, we got a call back about what they were going to do to fix it. Well, maybe he really did want to hear it. But the basis of that, and you referenced it earlier, was alignment among the leadership team. So after every visit out in our field, and we had over 1,000 locations across 47 states, would be a visit to whichever leader at our corporate office or headquarters that I needed to meet with, and not in a contentious way, just, hey, here's what I'm hearing. Is there validity to this? Because sometimes there wasn't, right? Sometimes there was the easy, let's blame it on corporate. So you have to do some fact checking. And, I have this saying, listen, before you say that's what happened, make sure that's what happened. And, that's one of my favorite things to just come back to. Okay, well, I fact checked it and they were right. So now what are we going to do about it? But I think, what the basis of that is having an aligned leadership team as well. And that's certainly from top of house down to, your manager level people leader of, is there alignment and are we all moving in the same direction?
And do we know what that direction is? Do we know where we're going?
Right. And, I kept hearing that we have, Wi-Fi connectivity issues in our stores. And I was like, it can't be. I mean, every store I walk into talks about it. And that next year, our major main IT project was enhancing the Wi-Fi across our stores. So, the concept is if you ask and you get an answer, you better fix it. And if you can't, then just explain why. Yeah. Right. Don't go dark on your team. Just own it and explain the why. And that's all people really want, is some closure on, well, hey, they tried, but here's why we can't do it. Or, hey, we're going to fix it. Here's when we're going to fix it. And then make sure you follow through on that.
There you go, throwing logic and simplicity into this again. And it really is that simple. One of the things you just left out of that story that struck me in the book is you apologized. You're like, listen, I am sorry. This has been your experience. How many employees? I mean, I'm sure the first few times you dropped that line, you like the looks on faces, like, is this a test? Is this a trick? Like,
yeah, well, I tell a story about this just incredible store manager we had where he just had everything working against him, right? And I say it in the book, lights were broken, there wasn't enough parking, and the carpet in his store looked worse than the one in my dorm room, and that was hard to do. And this can't be the experience, not just for our employees, obviously for our customers or our guests, right? Yeah. And so I just said, hey, I just want to say I'm sorry. I said, we've treated you terribly, and you deserve better than this. And thanks for not giving up on us. And I have a lot of notes that I'm going to take back, and I'll be in touch, and we'll figure out what we can do. And the regional director I was traveling with looked at me and said, I can't believe you just said that. And it was like, well, it's true. Yeah. And again, this just isn't that hard. I mean, own it, right? A store manager deserves better than, that store manager was getting. And so, I had a lot of notes to take back. And we had a lot of things we had to fix. So,
and then you did it. And that's how you build credibility. So what I think is really cool, Eric, I mean, so yes, this book, I'm not going to say it's revolutionary because it's really simple, but it's revolutionary in that we overcomplicate everything. So kudos to you on writing what I'm sure will become an Amazon bestseller.
Thank you.
Well, I'm buying them for my friends in leadership. Like, read this book, like help us help each other. But what you also, you kind of take these lessons, and you run a business called GKG, and you reference that philosophy in the book: get good employees, keep good employees, grow good employees. Again, so simple that it's now revolutionary. So tell us about GKG and what you do.
Yeah, so I started GKG at the beginning of 2020. And as you said, I mean, the sort of elevator pitch is really simple. GKG stands for the three things I think leaders need to spend most of their time focused on, and that's getting, keeping, and growing talent. Yeah. And so we have services kind of under each of those buckets. The foundation is what you talked about, and we talked about earlier, this lead tool. And, there's a big difference in companies between leaders knowing what their job is and how they should lead, or how as a leadership team they should lead. And, everybody knows what their job is, and the VP of operations and VP of HR. but how are we as a leadership team going to create this really awesome culture?
Mm-hmm.
And so that we work with a company, we come in, we use the lead tool. In some cases, we use it just as it's written and published in the book, because
Mm-hmm.
I've used it in 3 different industries, and it works because it's about leadership.
Yeah.
Or in some cases, there's some customization. Hey, we have this thing that's really precious to us in our company. We want to include it. Okay, great. But once we build the tool, then the hard work begins, which is doing an honest assessment of all of your leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And once you assess your leaders, if you do it appropriately and correctly and with the gut check moments along the way,
yeah,
you're going to have 2 outcomes. You're going to identify people who will not be part of your future story, and you will identify people who are going to be a huge part of your future story. And at that point, GKG works with the companies to kind of help them with both ends of that spectrum. So GET is obviously executive search, and let's help you replace this leader.
Mm-hmm.
KEEP is using that lead tool to identify and start to create the culture that high performers want to be a part of. And then GROW is really 2 things. On the high potential and high performing side, it's executive coaching and development. Let's work with your leaders to continue to help them excel. And GROW is about a very respectful, high touch, sort of customized outplacement or transition to help that leader find their next opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
That as a company, you can feel like, even when I made that difficult decision, I showed as much respect as I could. And that's another, concept that I talk about is, I've never understood why companies don't show as much respect to the people who are leaving the organization as the people who are joining the organization.
Yeah.
And there's no reason not to. And you gain nothing by treating somebody who, whether they're leaving voluntarily or you're having to make the decision for them,
Mm-hmm.
they deserve respect regardless.
Yeah.
So, it's sort of this, packaged offering. Now, all of those services are independent.
Mm-hmm.
Very proud in 2020, GKG placed multiple senior level leaders for a global Fortune 300 company. We're proud of that work as kind of a standalone executive search offering.
Mm-hmm.
I love to do coaching, and certainly, I joke about it in the book. I say, listen, I've been lucky enough to be fired twice and have my position eliminated once.
Yeah.
And that is an experience. And for anyone who's gone through it, there's a lot of emotion that comes with that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to sit with people who are going through that same exploratory phase of what just happened and what's next, and really work with them to help them find that next thing that usually is an even more exciting journey than the one they just left, but it's hard to see when you're in the middle of it. So that's really GKG, and we're excited. We've had some great conversations with a lot of companies, and proud of the work we're doing, and excited to tell more people about it. So.
Well, you're in the right place, because we're the chamber. We tell people about all the cool things, and I'd love to talk about Shakopee is like the epicenter of cool businesses and cool products and cool people that very few people know about. I joke that when I retire from chamber life, which if I haven't done it after this year, I'm probably never going to do it. Right. Then I'm going to write a book called Who Knew? Because there is like we drive through our industrial park. There's businesses out there. So, we've got Kennard Aerospace. They were in downtown Shakopee. I toured when they were still there. I toured the downstairs. They had spools taller than me of airplane wire. So if you've ever flown on an airplane, the cabling from the cockpit to the back of the plane started in Shakopee. If you've ever driven through a drive-through at a restaurant, a Dairy Queen, or seen a movie thing, it probably was printed at Imagine Print Solutions. I mean, Shakopee is like the epicenter of all the cool stuff in the world, and we're the best kept secret. So I'm going to write a book. Probably won't be as funny as yours, but
listen, we've lived here 17 years. My wife Jennifer and I. We have a daughter who graduated from Shakopee High School in 2018, and my son is a junior at the high school. And talk about change in 17 years. We've been glad that we've been here for all of it, and I couldn't agree more. It's great community, and we're proud to be here.
Yeah, well, we're glad you're here. And one of the coolest things I've discovered about Shakopee in my time here is that it not only is super cool and rich in industry and diversity, they're fiercely loyal to their own. So I am telling every Shakopee listener right now, and non-Shakopee listeners, go buy this book, support the hometown guy. Plus you're going to learn something along the way. Even if like I was thinking about this, like I'm always looking for the translation because, you applied this principle to a lot of different industries
Yep.
and now you're working with companies that are varied in industry and background, but it translates, but it could also translate to personal relationships. I mean, life is definitely too short to let people violate rule number 3, and whether it's work or home.
Yes.
I mean, like,
when I've had people ask me to sign, which is very humbling, and can you sign a copy? I have kind of two versions, and one is life is too short to work with bad leaders, and the other is life is too short to work with the uncensored version of rule number 3,
yeah.
and it's just true. I mean,
it's just true.
It's life is too short to have to deal with that every day.
Well, I see a big merch opportunity for you because I would buy the coffee cup, I'd buy the book, I'd buy the shirt. Like I might get a billboard. Life's just too short to work with rule number 3 violators. So now, Eric, as part of, so we've talked about GKG, we've talked about the book, but people can hire you to come and speak. You do keynote speaking. I know we're going to book you at the chamber for our members to get a little training from you, but how do people find you?
Yeah. So, if you happen to buy the book, in the author's page, there's some contact information. But the email is really simple. It's Eric, ERIC, at gkgconsultants.com. You can check out our website, gkgconsultants.com. And my contact information is available there. Would love to hear from you. And I love to have opportunities to do this and speaking and getting in front of teams and kind of doing a deeper dive on what does lead really mean? Because they're self-explanatory, but there's sort of there's a talk track around each one that I think helps leaders kind of put it into a better perspective or a more applicable perspective of how is that going to show up every day. So yes, very excited anytime I get a chance to do this and get in front of leadership teams.
Well, I think it's great. And we're grateful. And I do think that the work you're doing on any given day is so important, but in the midst of a global pandemic where the work has shifted and people are working remotely, and that's a whole new dynamic. You're going to start to see teams, not weather this storm so well. Like it's, everything is kind of fun and new. It's like we talked about yesterday when Best Buy rolled out ROWE, results oriented work environment, 10 years ahead of their time. Well, now we're living in that, and that's become the new norm, but we're going to start to see some things that, dynamics that are going to have to change, and the way relationships work. And I think the work that you are doing and the concepts in this book are going to become even more important.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And, I had a conversation with somebody recently with kind of that conversation, what's the difference? How do you lead people through a video screen?
Yeah.
And I try to keep things simple. I said the same way you do in person, right?
Yeah.
You lead. And do you do this every day? You don't need to be sitting across from someone. A lot of us get energy from that, and we would love to be in front of our teams. And it is a transition for all of us. But I believe that people who are working right now who have a good leader are having a good experience, and people who are working right now remote who have a bad leader are having a bad experience.
Yeah.
And it's because good leaders lead.
Yeah.
So,
authentic and genuine is authentic and genuine, whether you're face to face or via the Zoom. Right. Yeah. So, and people can smell it a mile away if it's not legit. So, Eric, I want to thank you for your time today and for joining us. And I want to thank all of you who keep tuning in every week to listen to our fun little podcast. We were really happy to bring you this show today and highlight one of Shakopee's own. And I'm going to work really hard to make sure he's one of our newer chamber members coming up here. So nobody gets away without joining the chamber, Eric. So anyway, I want to thank once again our sponsor, O'Brien's Public House, and encourage all of you to support not only them during this time with takeout and just helping out. Like, even if you're not going to eat, buy gift cards, hand them out. They need our help, and it helps get your Christmas shopping done. So I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. By the time this airs, it'll be over, but make sure you support local, shop local, Black Friday. And yeah, I guess that's it for today. Thanks so much, Eric. We'll see you around Shakopee soon, I hope.
Absolutely. And hey, let's change workplace culture one Monday morning at a time.
I love it.
And I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. Really fun talking to you. Look forward to seeing you soon.
We'll do this again, I promise. Thanks, Eric.